Today is the Rapp lecture for contemporary art. We took a little bit of a break from that because of this COVID thing, but I'm really honored to have Mort and Carol Rapp here this evening. So big shout out for them. And this lecture was endowed by their daughter, Laura, and Jay, son-in-law. Just thank you very, very, very much. It's special to have you here. In the early 1990s, a long time ago, I was a student at Hampshire College, and an art historian named Simon Watley came and spoke. He gave a talk at the college, 1,000 students at this tiny school in Massachusetts. And it was during the time of HIV/AIDS, and it was the first time that I saw an image of Wolfgang Tillmans. I was pretty taken by it. I saw his first work then in 1994. He had an exhibition in New York at the Andrea Rosen Gallery, and it's kind of amazing because I've met now 3 people tonight who also saw that show in 1994. So I didn't realize kind of that this would be something that would stick with me for a long time. I think what struck me about his work, and I hope you see it in it, is that it's both casual and exacting. It's bold, but also comforting. And it's spontaneous, but it fits really well with art history, that kind of timelessness of art history. Let's just say that when Sophie and Julian came with the idea of doing an exhibition and working with Wolfgang at the AGO, it was a super easy, of course, yes, let's go for it. So it's just, these are works that have been around for a while, and I think they really connect with our audience today. We have a whole group of Tillmans in our collection, and I just want to recognize Tom Bjarnason, who passed away during COVID, who was one of our donors, and then also Glenn Buschelberger and George, Glenn and George, who also have given works to our collection. This work, just some thank yous here. It is an extraordinary effort to do a Tillmans show. When it opens, you will see how much work goes in there. It's amazing. So I just want to thank the staff, particularly the installers, both his team and our team, who are doing an amazing, amazing job. So thank you all. And of course, the brain behind our photo program is Sophie Hackett, and I'm going to hand the phone over to Sophie.
For those of you who don't know, I'm Sophie Hackett. I'm the curator of photography here at the AGO, and it's really, truly a distinct pleasure to welcome you all here tonight and to introduce this year's speaker for the Rapp Lecture for Contemporary Art, Wolfgang Tillmans. So it seems that everyone's going to insist on the early 90s. I apologize, I'm following the trend. About 30 years ago, in 1993, Tillmans opened an exhibition in Cologne in 2 spaces run by Daniel Buchholz and his father. And in that space, in those spaces actually, he installed a range of color photographs, magazines, magazine pages, photocopies, and inkjet prints that were mounted to fabric. He installed them in clusters on the wall, in display cases, and pegged to a clothesline that responded to the spaces of the antiquarian bookshop, and at the same time infused those spaces with contemporary photographic material. Tillmans has continued to refine and expand this practice since then. He's added new kinds of pictures to his repertoire, both still and moving, and at different scales, in different types of prints. He's always maintaining a balance between the deliberate and the serendipitous. He is always attuned to the particularities of the spaces where he presents his work, and he always keeps a keen eye on the ways the surfaces of our world and the information and ideologies that these surfaces reveal, on the ways that all of those things have changed. His way of working, images without hierarchy in relation to each other in gallery spaces, has entered the lexicon of contemporary art so fully that it's actually easy to lose sight of where and when it began. And it began with Wolfgang Tillmans. As we prepare to open his retrospective, Wolfgang Tillmans to Look Without Fear, here at the AGO later next week, an exhibition that originated last fall at the Museum of Modern Art in New York and put together by our great colleague Roxana Marcoch and others on her team. This really seemed a great moment to emphasize again the originality of Wolfgang's work and the impact that it's had. And I want to say, too, that we want to revel again still in how exciting it is to walk into a room animated with Tillmans' work, each photograph, each wall, and each space. All great artists teach us to see in a new way, and Tillmans has taught us to experience photographs in relation to each other and allowed us to meet familiar images anew by presenting them in new formats and in new relationships. Each installation is a moment in time, in a given place, and in his career. Through his photographs and through his evolving photographic relationships and presentations, Tillmans participates, witnesses, and advocates, and continues to shape a new sense of what's beautiful, of what's pleasurable, and of what's possible. He has said, "I see my installations as a reflection of the way I see, the way I perceive or want to perceive my environment. They're also always a world that I want to live in." I couldn't agree more. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Wolfgang Tillmans.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Sophie, for welcoming me. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Forgive me, I'm, of course, a little nervous. Yes, I took this photograph yesterday outside the pavement of AGO, and I was wondering, what is this? Is this salt or gravel? Or it's gravel? Salt, that's right. And how come it doesn't dissolve? Okay. Yes, and it's, of course, a beautiful light drawing. Of course, it's obvious, we know that the word photography its origins are coming from drawing with light. And when we arrived here on Wednesday last week in the morning, I saw this wall drawing, which was the positions of the photographs as I had planned them in my studio over the course of the last 6 months in an architectural model that I always prepare when planning an exhibition. So I meticulously plan the shows in my studio, but then bring more work with me to the exhibition so that I can respond to the space and the development of the exhibition. There's always a component of architecture in the work, in my work, in the photography, as well as in the exhibition spaces. And I like to take the spaces as they are and not only look at the beautiful bits, but I also like to accept, like in life, I like to accept the full reality of them. Like they are light switches and sensors and fire exit signs, and again, instead of battling against them, I often incorporate them. I take you through the exhibition a little bit with pictures from the AGO, from the 5th floor, as it stands, and also along the lines of the exhibition at MoMA. And both exhibitions are particular and special in the way that they are chronological. They follow a 35-year trajectory of my work. Here you see the model in my studio, and in the center cube on the left, there is a work that I'm really excited that we can show it here because it was not part of the MoMA exhibition. And it's called Book for Architects. It's from 2014. And it was first shown at Rem Koolhaas's Architecture Biennale in Venice. I wrote a short text for it. Over the past 10 years, I've photographed buildings in ordinary and extraordinary contexts in 37 countries on all 5 continents, displaying the complexity and the irrationality, sometimes madness, and at other times beauty of architecture. These pictures in their totality seem to me a little daunting, but have always been taken with a kind eye. Seen in mass and the world over, I'm fascinated by the infinite number of formal and structural solutions human logic found for similar architectural problems. Book for Architects is not a book design, but a video installation presented as a looped projection of still images on 2 walls. My interest is not a typological approach, but to show a sequence and an arrangement of images that echo what examples of the built environment look and feel like to me. I don't use wide-angle or shift lenses, but a standard lens that most closely approximates the perspective of the human eye. The various elements of architecture appear here at times clearly and cleanly, and at other times in a layered and convoluted way. As such, the installation represents and emulates the randomness, beauty, and imperfection that characterizes built reality, both past and present. So please take the 40 minutes that it takes to view the whole work. But let's start from the beginning. This is still life with a sculpture called Firecracker in My Head, which I made when I was 17 in 1986, and I feel lucky that photography came into my life as the main means of expression last. Having been born into a family of avid amateur photographers, even my great-mother won a small Kodak award in 1910 or something. It was clear that as a young teenager, I certainly wouldn't use photography to express myself in. And so I drew, I made clothes, I made music, stints at painting, and all other media, and only in 1986, 87, when I wanted to make a little zine, I went to a local copy shop and found a new photocopier that was the first digital photocopier that was able to enlarge grayscale photographs in grayscale and not in the harsh contrasty ways that photocopies normally were. And I was totally struck by it, and these became sort of the first works here seen at MoMA, together with what I call my photograph number 1 on top, called Lacanau Self, which is at the same time maybe also the first abstract picture and my first self-portrait, because when you probably not everybody recognizes it, it's very simple. It was a self-affirmative act on the beach on an interrail trip in France, and of a realization I am, and I am. And I looked down on me and I photographed what I saw. So it's the pink t-shirt, the shorts, and my knee on sand. And these photocopies I made in 3 enlargement processes. And this is kind of ironic that 35 years later, this late teenage work, which I photographed originally on the left on the Avenue of Americas in New York as a exchange student when I visited my pen pal Patty in Walnutport, Pennsylvania. And I ran away on a Greyhound bus for a day trip to New York. And then I enlarged these structures, and in a way my love for photography began with dissolving it, taking it apart, seeing what is the surface, and creating a new surface through the rough scanner quality that was in this copier at the time. You see all the noise, the lines at the bottom in the dark area, I found hugely attractive and in a way more expressive than the marks that I made with my hand on paper. Oh, this is called Sun from 1987. And so this fascination with how does meaning get into a mechanically produced standard sheet of paper, that has been fascinating me ever since, really. You know, the expressive gesture on canvas or on clay is what is clearly and always identified as expressive. But I also, in the 80s, growing up, recognized and felt drawn to electronic music, which other people said was stupid and didn't have expressive powers. And this coexistence of chance and control, of machine and mind, has been of great inspiration and fascination, which is all about the 2 dimensions, but I live my life in 3 dimensions, and I think about the world in 3D and see the world in 3D, and found early on that photography, because then I actually bought my first camera when I was 20 in order to make more photocopies. But then I realized I could speak with the camera itself, and for example, found that this sculptural situation of these gray jeans over a banister is for me most economically translated into a work, not by somewhat keeping it, making it maybe a cast of it, or filling it with starch, turning it into a ready-made. I felt, no, the simplicity of photographing it is also doing justice to the sculptural qualities of this, what I saw. And this is also a kind of sculptural problem, which is actually my mother's foot after a walk in 1989, and I recognized like the human condition in this, which we all share, this nuisance of a sock that slips. Or the absurdity and beauty of a 1980s brown hovering hairdryer. This all happened when I was living in a small city in industrial Western Germany, and I had a strong love for music, dance and pop music, and English subculture. And in 1987, I moved to Hamburg, and I was able for the first time to be part of a youth culture, and it was the time of acid house, house music, that was a revolutionary moment when the posing of the 80s was washed away by a more egalitarian approach of the shared community of ecstasy culture and on the dance floor. And I somehow always felt these moments in clubs, on the dance floor or on the side, watching, were not just hedonistic and superficial, but had something deeply human and humane about them. And I felt I want to capture this scene and be able and to talk about it, and had almost like a missionary zeal, like this spirit, this peace and love of that moment felt important to share. And of course, it was also almost simultaneous with the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, that this dance culture swept across Europe and brought people together in new ways. And so I worked, I brought these pictures to a magazine I loved, ID in London and Tango in Hamburg, and started to also photograph editorially, and using magazines as a platform to amplify ideas or to amplify causes. There is a spread here in the exhibition, for example, on the bottom left, called "Whatever Happened to the Peace Movement" in 1993, or about the Love Parade in Berlin. And I was lucky that I was able to design the pages myself at ID. And just like I loved the photocopy papers, I also treated the magazine pages as an original. So when I designed them myself, they were originals, just in a print run of 20,000. No? They were like a small print, a handmade print I made in my darkroom, had an edition of 10, but it also existed in the magazine and later in books that I designed. So this love for the printed page is something that's been with me from the start, and it's something that stayed with me. And so also here there are some examples of magazine pages incorporated in the installation. And here we see the first view from the skyjack upstairs on the 5th floor. It's basically the tallest exhibition I've ever had. The spaces are 7 meters high, and it's been great making use of it in some instances. I guess this was a pivotal moment for me in 1991, 92, to have found a way of taking portraits that represent the way that I saw contemporaries. Before, I had observed that young people were usually represented in media as a little crazy, making a funny pose or being photographed with extreme wide angle or colored light, just as if excusing themselves for, well, this is just a passing phase. But I didn't find myself not serious, not to be taken serious. I thought this is I'm thinking seriously about the world and what is going on around me, and I perceived my contemporaries as serious beings who also loved having fun. So I photographed them confident and fragile at the same time, but just making no excuse for themselves. In 1995, I was lucky to had my first book published, and as it happened, it was not a small one. It was with Taschen, the biggest art publishing house in the world, and so at 27, I had a monograph that was available all over the globe, and many contemporaries saw themselves in the book, but older people actually saw youth. I mean, that's something that now being 54, I realize also that young people are youth, but to themselves we are just people, and this was my first contact with Canada, Windsor, Ontario. I lived in New York at the time in '94, and I loved Plastic Man, the techno musician, and had his album Music on repeat when ID asked me if I would want to travel to Windsor to take his portrait. And as it happened, this amazing musician and star in Europe was still living with his parents, and so this and he literally went to Europe to DJ on Friday on a plane, and came back on Monday to live and work in there, and but that weekend he played a night in Toronto. And so we drove there here and spent the night and drove back the next morning. And so I spent a night in Toronto 20 or 30, is it 29 years ago. Oops. And here it is on the 5th floor, together with a portrait of Kate Moss, kind of my only real moment with high fashion. I've always loved clothes, but and the meaning of style and the meaning of clothes and the form and shape and tactility in all sorts of aspects has been part of my work, but I've never been able to work in a commercial sense with it, in advertising or shoots that I didn't fully plan and control myself. Of course, I like to look at all sorts of people. This is Oskar Niemeyer, who I was privileged to meet at the age of 102 in 2010. This is called Alex and Lutz Sitting in Trees, and it's from 1992, and it's a staged scenario, but was at the same time photographed as if it just happened like that. And that's a beauty and a strength and power in photography that I recognized early on, that that if it looks real or if it felt real at the time, and true to our intentions of the moment, it is authentic. And this was a series of photographs that were published as a fashion story in ID, that I styled as well, but that were a portrayal of Lutz and Alex and my sort of playful approach to the body, and we wanted to, it was called Like Brother, Like Sister, and I for years I felt there's a certain inequality between a topless woman and topless man in magazines, and I thought it should really be equal with a bottomless man. And this is called Suzanne and Lutz White Dress Army Skirt. Again, I made the skirt, and it was a photograph that first appeared in ID, but simultaneously was exhibited at June in 1993, the seminal exhibition by the Purple collective, curated by Purple, and it's something, like in those this time, like people think of the 90s now as like all happy and wonderful, but that time, 93, didn't actually feel easy, and it felt convoluted, it felt awkward, and even though there was post Cold War, I guess the post-Cold War euphoria of 89-90 had faded. There was a recession, and there was a war in Europe, in Yugoslavia. And I have been always seeing the connection of the personal and the private and the political, and haven't really, and never wanted to make political art, but as in campaigning art, but the awareness of how everything I live through has been influenced by politics is an underpinning of my work. And the aesthetics of political decisions can be deceiving, like this beautiful picture of an ugly eviction of one of the last remaining squats in the East Village in New York in '95. And this interest in different, in the whole picture of the life that surrounded me, my contemporaries, people I know and don't know, the urban landscape, the still lifes, some arranged, some found, the whole array of what literally inspired me to want to depict them. I felt from that exhibition in '93 that Sophie mentioned, only able to really do justice by bringing them into the space in a non-linear way, also for economical reasons for space. No, there simply is a much greater depth and range achievable by using the entire wall, and I've used primarily three sizes of photographs now since 30 years. So there is a matrix and a pattern running through all my exhibitions of the last 30 years of the three main sizes, which are industrially produced sizes formerly by Fuji and Kodak originally, and there's also the postcard size print. Here is the upstairs 5th floor in under construction. Dear Hirsch from 1995. In 2017, I had a short speech, kind of, at Fondation Bayerle, and I wrote this text on the way there, in the taxi there, actually, and I just want to read it out. I'm aware how my brain fails me. I think I said something, but I hadn't. I thought I saw something, but I didn't. I believe you said this, but in fact you said that. The eyes are optical instruments. By default, they are impartial. They project light that falls through its lenses onto the retina. I need to know what the brain does to what my eyes see. To observe, what do I want to see? What do I really see? What do I see, and what do I want to see? What is in the picture? What is in the room, on the walls? And what does the visitor see? What does she want to see? What do I need her for to complete the picture? This sounds like a flaw, an exception. But different people see different things in the same picture. I act surprised, but I should really view it as normal, and then discuss this. We need to discuss the fact that humans seem to function like this. Not only discuss the opposing views and records, but let's discuss the very fact that the same and similar humans come to such different conclusions. For that, we need humility. Progress can only begin when I start to accept that all humans are born equal. When I start observing how I observe. I need to observe, not just talk and shout. Careful observation with the openness to change my mind when results differ from my preconceived ideas. Allow evidence. That is what my work is about. This is Macau Bridge, 1993. Jochen taking a bath, 1997. Window Caravaggio, 97. Jochen was my partner in the mid-90s until he died prematurely and suddenly within a month of AIDS, which we didn't know about. And he was a great painter, classically trained at the Art Academy in Munich, and he sort of opened my eyes to old masters, and these are postcards I brought back from a trip to Rome, where I had an exhibition, and I made a point of seeing every Caravaggio in the city, it was a real eye-opener to understand that these were pictures of a 26-year-old man or 28-year-old man, the same age that I was then, and that we are contemporaries through the centuries, and I understood other artists, dead artists, from then on as potential friends. We could have been friends, maybe. And that Caravaggio's way of rebellion were maybe painting the saints' feet dirty. It was a very special and sad year, but also in the moment of greatest happiness, I followed through on an idea that I had for some years, which was photograph the airplane Concorde, which I had noticed above London, where I lived since '92, but also in New York, when you were by the beach, and I was struck by that. Everybody who sees it feels or saw it, felt special for that moment. That and we were able to project our hopes for a better future through technology, science and technology, into this delta shape, which was the last surviving space age product that was still functioning in its original shape and form. Other things looked dated from the 60s, and this still had this awe-inspiring feel that I wanted to photograph as this poetic carrier, and not wanting access to it from the inside. So this has all been taken on in South London and outside of Heathrow Airport. And there are, of course, also 56 color fields. And here being installed at AGO. Could also be nice to leave it like this. And the fabric, the Faltenwurf skylight on top, is part of a group of pictures like that began with the gray jeans over the banister in 1991, and like a few groups of families of pictures, I call them, stay with me through my career. And I don't call them serious, because I don't really work in a serial fashion, but they run in parallel, and maybe once or twice or 3 times a year, maybe there's one added to that family. And the earliest passion of my life was astronomy, and is astronomy. And this is a photograph from 2011 called Munuwata Sky, and is part of a period from 2009 to 11 when I realized that it's time to switch systems and try out speaking with a digital camera. And I soon realized that there are downsides, but there are also upsides. And the downsides I took 3 years to digest, I guess. And the upsides were, for example, the ability to take such a photograph without the stars or the island being moved by the rotation of the Earth. You'll see upstairs 3 large photographs of the Sun from 2004, which show the transit of the planet Venus. This little disk is Venus, as if in a solar eclipse where the moon is transiting in front of the Sun. Here, the planet Venus is exactly in line between Earth and Sun, and this happens every 128 years, and 8 years after, and then not for another 128 years, and it was a magical moment of feeling the solar system at work. And it has a fascinating history in science, actually. Captain Cook discovered Australia because he was sent on a mission to measure the time of entry when Venus touched the sun's disk on a transit in the 17th or 18th century, because scientists had understood that when you observe something from two distant spots on the planet, you can measure the parallax and hence find out the distance of the sun. So the transit of Venus was the first way how humans could reliably locate themselves in the solar system and know basically where they are. This is also the 5th floor. Like, the walls are not all equally densely hung, and there are linear arrangements just as there are arrangements stretching from floor to high up. And here is a work called Ice Storm, which is also the cover of the catalog, and it's an example of a few photographs I call intervention pictures, which are light drawings on photographs in the process of enlarging, exposing the photograph. So the photograph, the negative and the drawing process happened simultaneously in the darkroom. This is from 2001, and this is called I Don't Want to Get Over You from 2000, which is also in this exhibition and was the center image in the installation of my Turner Prize exhibition in 2000 at Tate Britain. I never felt it necessary to say, but I realize it is, of course, necessary to say that I'm not using any digital manipulation in my work. So all the works you see are analog, and I, even though I photograph now since 13, 14 years ago, also digitally, I don't move any pixels, and that's why I call myself still an analog photographer. This is called Blushes number 3, and is light, purely light drawn on paper, and then the paper being processed in the regular processing machine. And this is called Quarry 2. And I've found it interesting that how the eye works, speaking of observing how I look, that the blur on the top left and on the mid right, the green blur, my eye completely and without question understands and reads as leaves that are close to the camera. They don't read like this is abstraction, this is an abstracted leaf. And so I experimented with adding, drawing other elements into the picture, again, simultaneously in the short exposure process in the darkroom. And this one's called Muscle. Anders pulling splinter from his foot. 2004. This was not staged, and it's not actually a quotation of the Spinario, famous Greek and Roman sculptural subject. It is a contemporary, real-life version of it, because what makes this antique sculpture so touching and so eternally popular is that so many humans know how annoying it is to have a splinter in your foot, just like that sock. This is a view from MoMA. Window-shaped tree. When I lived in New York in the mid-90s, and also London, I noticed that there is a category of news photographs on newspapers, often even the front page, a category which was unique, I recognized. It's a person that is not known, famous, or doesn't do anything special. And I questioned, like, why is that? Often the caption literally only reads, like here in these examples, a Pakistani soldier, or un guerriero albanese, or it was, I collected them at the end of the 90s from a media archive that I fortunately collect. I probably would be, if I wasn't an artist, I would be classified as a hoarder. But since I'm able to harvest the archives of ephemera that I accumulate, because I find, the ephemeral is kind of almost more rare after time than the collector's edition. So I was then culling these pictures, which I had observed from a corner of the eye over the years, and made this installation called Soldiers the 90s. And it's, I guess, a media observation of the 90s and the role, the relationship to war and men in uniform, and what in that time of perceived peace, post-Cold War, the role was of soldiers were often talked about as peacekeepers, or was it, there was a war on every day in the 1990s, and why were soldiers always only shown literally posing, doing nothing? This is called The Color of Money from 2007, and it's the city of London. And I have a strong sense of light color, and I guess before the advent of auto white balance, people had no idea that there is yellow color and green color in lighting, and here you see the green color of the fluorescent office lighting in the banks in the city of London, and the warm yellow lighting of the domestic streets around it. Or on the top right, it's a piece called Meeting Lights. And I was at photographing a HIV treatment access conference in Cape Town, and there are pictures of the activists from 30 different countries that I collected for a campaigning brochure, but I also noticed this nondescript conference room and all the different light sources, all emitting different colors, and making this mesh of green and yellow, and a kind of random but highly specific composition that was a little bit paving the way for what would become Neue Welt, the project from 2009 to 12. In '95, when I lived in New York, I observed that if I stood at the traffic light on my crossing when everybody else walked, you can see the rats coming in and out of the what are they called? Gutter, sewer. And so when everybody stood, the rats knew that people might look. And when you walked, then they also would run. And I kind of, I don't want them in my house, but I kind of learned to like them and see that they are also living and having a community there. I later made the photocopier itself a subject of photographs. And the photographic paper, as it passes through a dirty processing machine in which the baths have collected the residue of the photographic process itself, actually there's no more working chemicals in the bath, only residue that slightly processes the paper as it passes through. I detected and observed a great beauty in around the late 90s, and began this ongoing group called Silver, alluding to the silver that is, of course, the foundational material that makes photography happen and possible. And in the bleach fix process, the silver is washed out of the paper. It's very little amounts, but over time it collects, and on that top left one, there is actually a darker spot. When you look from really below and catch the reflection of a ceiling light in it, you see a metallic reflection. So these are mechanical pictures that where all the image-giving process is not influenced by my hands. And they are coming from the rollers of the machine, which create this rhythmic quality, and this is a silver that is in the sort of upstairs, where there is an entrance area, but there is also a connecting zone between the end and the beginning, which brings a really nice circularity to the exhibition. This is called Paper Drop Passage from 2019, and Paper Drop Red from 2006. So this it took me many years working with paper and appreciating paper until in 2001 to actually turn the camera at paper itself, and then in 2005 I folded, let paper rest on itself, and realized that it actually created a drop-like shape, even though in 2001 the first paper drop was more in reference to paper dropping. And this fascination with the material, with the medium, led me in the 2000s to explore all possible ways, or I don't know what else is possible, but this was me making photography do what it's designed to do. You know, this picture is not an abuse of the medium. No, the silvers are really like dirt and not doing to the photograph what should be done to it. But this is a color light sensitive paper being exposed and drawn on with colored light. And it is part of a group called Freischwimmer. Just like this one is photographed upstairs, Ostgute Freischwimmer left. And these are enlargements of smaller, unique originals that I then print as inkjet prints, a technique that I used since 1992 when inkjet prints were completely unstable. But I loved them from the start because I liked the quality of the ink in the thin layer of chalk that is on the paper, and this experience, the sensation of the real, of the color in front of my eye. And again, these are a process of drawing. Here, a close-up detail. And on the right, a group of lighters that are 20 by 24 inch photographs, sculptural photographs. For the first time, I did them in 2005, and it was interesting that purely by this act of folding, the photograph is refusing to represent. It's no longer just depicting something else, but this says, now you're looking at me. It's a process that in the folding, sometimes I apply in the darkroom before exposure, like on the work on the left, or after exposure, and they are shaped also sometimes prior to processing or after. Lighter Blew Up from 2010. I am aware that I have only 15 minutes left, so I have to speed up a little. We're only in 2011 now. So around the end, towards the end of the 2000s, after a decade of intensely working on the materiality of the photograph, the object, the photograph as object, which was really not beforehand much thought about, because photographs were only showing something else. You know, they were not looked at as things themselves. And so the way that I hung them and since the early 90s was not because I wanted it to be grungy and slapdash, but it was because I wanted to show the beauty of this, this extremely shallow cube, as I sometimes see them. You know, the fragility of the surface, which is equally its strength. And but then in around 2008-9, I wanted to take photographs again 20 years after I started taking pictures of the world around me, but take the new camera, the digital camera, to places outside of my comfort zone, to see how does the world look today, and which resulted in a book and exhibition called Neue Welt in 2012. And it has, the photographs have technology in some way woven into them, either from the technology that went into making them, that they were not possible to be taken beforehand with conventional film, or they were speaking about technology in, for example, the traffic, the headlights of cars, which I had observed over the course of the years, had transformed from friendly eyes into aggressive, shark-like, mean faces, which I felt, which was never talked about, but I felt, car designers are very smart, and they must answer something here, a more muscular, everyone for themselves, the rule of the stronger, which was also a development in society, and so this observation of how society and politics and attitudes always inscribe themselves in the surface of the visible world. Juries in 2011. I didn't want to take ugly pictures, but I also wanted to, I guess, look at things the way that that the photographs that I showed and made 20 years earlier caused concern and surprise and misunderstandings, and these were also received by mixed reviews in their time. This is called Ushuaia Favela, and the most southern city in the world, where computer-designed polystyrene packaging finds its use as a cold installation. Shanghai Night, 2009, a photograph that would not have been possible to take 10 years earlier, but with a highly sensitive night visibility. And when you go close up to this eye of the toucan, it looks like so unnatural, like as if it's a 3D printed or something. And this exhibition features some works that weren't in MoMA in New York. For example, this Astrocrusto, which I love a lot, but the MoMA show was so long in process that when we started discussing works in 2018, my Tate Modern exhibition in 2017 was so close, and Astrocrusto was the poster image of Tate Modern, that somehow it was never considered for New York, because there's always this little rivalry, or not rivalry, but and then I realized, this is really missing. I would love to have that big, and this is a video from 2014 called Instrument, and marks also a moment of turning or allowing a more performative side of myself. And it is filmed on the left in Tehran and on the right in Los Angeles, and two unconnected incidences, but of me both times in the morning awaking and seeing a crack in the curtain, emitting or letting through a very sharp ray of light, sunlight or light, and I started playing with it and started moving and realized that I made a rhythm and it became a dance, and it was sort of a perpetual movement where it wasn't clear what was the what is the origin of the dance as it makes the sound that I move to. And the two are not synced, but when they play side by side, they look as if they are synced. Intermittently, this video shows with Peas from 2003. And outside of the room, there is a group of photographs of demonstrations and political action. This is a diptych. It's one of my only diptychs, or few diptychs. The left is from 2003, the anti-Iraq demo in London, one of the biggest peacetime demonstration in the UK. And on the right, 2017, the anti-Muslim immigration demonstration. And now I hang them actually butted up, and it becomes sort of one frieze. And this action of demonstrating, I find has a great beauty in itself and a great power. It's of course not done for beauty, but it is a very touching and fundamental tool. And seeing what happened in Israel, and again, we are reminded just how important it is to use this right, and that demonstrations can change the course of politics, and often, of course, they don't. And I've felt always hugely grateful for enjoying the freedoms that I had growing up the way I did, and I feel like I owe this to the women who fought for voting rights pre-1918, or to the gay, lesbian, and straight courageous people who brought in the decriminalization of homosexuality in the late 60s in most countries. Those people were not safe. The civil rights movement, of course, it was never safe to fight for these rights, and I've always felt they are maybe not stable. They're not maybe not always here, but I couldn't, of course, imagine. By the way, this picture on the right is from 2004 in Berlin, and the one on the left is a solidarity demonstration for Istanbul Pride. And I could not have imagined 3 years even ago how in the United States now there's a mood war against LGBT and trans people. In 2014, I was in St. Petersburg, and it was 3 weeks after Russia annexed the Crimea Peninsula, and I came into my hotel room, and the television was showing this image, and it's like an old-fashioned ray cathode TV, but it was a flat screen, and it had an eerie quality because I felt, okay, this is what it would look like when a dictator switches off the TV channels they don't like. And in the past, it was kind of impossible to photograph the television static because you would always get these diagonal bars. And so I thought, let's see, this is this old image on a new, oldish new flat screen with my new camera, and I made this experiment, and I was able to photograph what again seemed impossible before. And what I didn't expect was that when printed at the full scale of 3 by 4 meters that it is in this exhibition, when you go really close up to the image, the black and white that you see suddenly turns into a full color picture. And then when you turn right to the side, it goes black and white again. And it's I always like to trust my eyes, but it's so important to know and observe how the eye sees. And here is the view into the large space, the second large space upstairs in the AGO, with installation here still in progress called Truth Study Center, and which I began in 2005, and which was, you know, at that time I was earlier explaining, I was really much working with in the darkroom with the qualities, conceptual qualities of the medium itself, and at the same time there was a whole different climate raging politically, and I realized that it's really all about men, usually men, claiming absolute truths, that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or that evolution deniers started claiming their place on the curriculum, or that in South Africa the health minister was denying that HIV was the cause of AIDS. There was all sorts of claims of truth that I felt I wanted to work about, but at the same time not abandon the other projects, the Paper Drop and the Freischwimmer that I was working with. And these tables became platforms for collages of texts that I collected, that either I pushed together to amplify perspectives, or to create absurd constellations, and they evolved over the years into a study also of viewing and perceiving visual information, and neuro scientific elements made their way into it. Of course, I had no idea in 2005 that fake news would be central to all discussions 10 years later. And here in the exhibition, there are some original tables from 2005, 6, and some made later, and some made and some made locally, which I always do for the spaces where I show. This is also a new for this exhibition, which wasn't in New York, and a picture I love a lot. It's called Tag Nacht 3, day night, and it's a view from an airplane, and which literally shows the shadow of the Earth, because on your right the sun has set under the horizon, and it's sort of throwing a diagonal shadow of the Earth into the there on the left already night sky. I promise to keep it to 75 minutes, so there's technically 1 minute left. I guess I have to wrap up, no? There is a, yes. This is a text work that I began in 2015, which is sometimes standalone, and here it is incorporated into the True Study Center's tables. And a reminder to myself that history is not something else, but history is now. And the continued love of portraiture is something that continues through my life and through the exhibition. A self-portrait, 2021. Weed. And here the counter shot of the grand Rapp gallery on the 5th floor. And here one of the newest works from 2021 called Concrete Column, which is an examination of this strange semi-liquid solid material concrete, which is actually a solid, even though briefly it acts like a liquid. And I wanted to try, is it possible to photograph it actually in a solid, or the liquidity as a solid. Around, the whole room has an ongoing, I guess, exploration of liquids and solids, and minerals and rocks. And on the right, another Tag Nacht, a division, a vertical distribution of color. To the left of it, passports. On top of it, bags of drinking water. In Abidjan, Ivory Coast, a view of Lagos. And the salt in my sweat left behind on a day, on a heat wave day, in my t-shirt. And a disarming picture of an unusual perspective of half of humankind. And important in all this, thinking about the political and the turmoil we're in, is a love for nightlife and for music, and the importance of keeping nightlife alive, and keeping safe spaces in cities, especially in inner cities where they have been squeezed out over the last 3 decades, really. And be open to play and expression of sexuality and joy. And I guess I could leave it at this encouragement. I just quickly run through the last pictures here. Examples of current magazine work. I still like occasionally to publish in magazines, and a portfolio here I did of photographs I made in on different African cities where I exhibited as part of a touring exhibition. Here an issue of Aperture that I guest edited, and I chose the subject spirituality. And here, the highest picture I ever hung. Actually, I mean, I did get up. I measured the height. Can I do it? But then I really couldn't. And Anders and Micha went up instead and courageously did it, whilst Richard and I observed from below. And please don't miss the cinema on the lower level. There is a piece called Moon and Earthlight, which is a music piece of 54 minutes and a film at the same time. It's a film, I guess, of visuals and music of different sources and origins that I composed to a single piece of 18 individual tracks and performative elements, and it is playing several evenings during the week and has special screening times, but it is, I think, playing 10 hours a week, so please make sure to not miss this. And also the photocopier also plays in this film. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang, for letting us into your world, letting us into the way that you see and perceive, and getting everyone, I think, excited. I'm excited again to see it tomorrow, the exhibition, when we go back in to keep installing. So make sure to come back. Our big public opening party for this exhibition is on April the 12th. There will be music, there will be dancing, there will be Wolfgang, and of course the galleries will be open. We'll be open from 6 to 11 p.m. that night, and the exhibition will be open those same hours. So please come back. Thank you for coming tonight, and we'll see you again on the 12th, if not another time. Take care.